Peace and blessings, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. This is Rayesa Gheewala, Certified High Performance Coach. And I'm here on this Friday morning wanting to connect with you and talk about fears. Fears that are real, that feel so real as a Muslim woman going through a divorce. And when you're stuck in these fears of what are people going to say? What are they going to think about me? What are my friends going to say? How are they going to respond? What are my parents going to say? What are my family going to say? What's going to happen to my children? It can become so consuming and so overwhelming that you're just stuck. You're just stuck in that situation. And it becomes very debilitating. Assalamu alaikum, Sarah. Thank you for joining. Welcome. Let me know where you're coming from. Hey, Safiya. Assalamu alaikum. Good to see you. Assalamu alaikum, Allah. Good to see you. Thank you, ladies, for joining me and engaging in this conversation that is so important and so taboo in our community, in our society that, you know, we're all thinking about it, or the people who are experiencing it, but we're not discussing it. We're not talking about it. Hey, Martin. Assalamu alaikum. Good to see you. Yes, of course you can join. Of course you can participate and engage. I think this is an important conversation for men and for women, right? Because we don't live in society and community with just women or just men. Like, society is made up of whole, healthy men and women who are contributing and working together. And, you know, when you go through a divorce, it's not just about the woman or the wife or the mother. There's another person out there who was part of a relationship. So this affects all of us, and men have fears too. I'm talking from my perspective of being a woman going through a divorce, have gone through a divorce, helping other people in becoming, in healing, in becoming whole, healthy people. Hey, Mike. Thanks. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. And you know what? These are all real fears that people have, whether you're Muslim or you're not. But I am a Muslim, and I work in the Muslim community, and I live in the Muslim community. And it's so debilitating because there's so much confusion between culture and faith of what God wants for you. And it gets so blurred that we feel that we need to oppress or abuse ourselves in order to please God, right? And it's so important to know that who has the power here, right? Where does all the power lie, and in whose hands is that? We get so wrapped up in what are people going to think, what is going to be my status in society, or are my friends going to abandon me? And nobody wants to be alone, right? And hey, assalamu alaikum, Amina, good to see you. Thanks for joining. And we get so wrapped up in that, and it becomes so real. The thoughts, they just, you know, whatever it is that you focus on grows. And when you keep focusing on the thoughts of the what ifs, it holds you back from making any decisions. It holds you back from having clarity. It holds you back from taking charge of your life and moving forward, whether you're thinking about a divorce, whether you are in the middle of a divorce, whether you have already gone through a divorce and you're trying to move forward in your life, right? Hey, Aziza, good to see you. Thank you for joining. And so it can become all consuming, and depending on who you surround yourself, what are you feeding your mind and your heart in terms of all of these fears, right? If it's being perpetuated, like if you have people around you who are saying, yes, you know, this is going to happen to you and that's going to happen to you, and people are not going to want to be your friend anymore. And, you know, people's husbands are going to say, well, don't talk to her anymore. She's contagious, right? If she is going through difficulties in her marriage, or she is not married, or she is single, or she's going through a divorce, it can happen to you too. And, you know, I've heard people say that, oh, don't talk to her, or don't hang out with her, she's divorced, like it's contagious. Hey, Akhil, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining. And, you know, people will say all sorts of stuff, and really it's none of your business what people say, right? You don't have to take on someone else's opinion and believe that it's your truth and then walk into it. Yeah, walk into it and then own it and then believe it and then show up that way. Yeah. We all go through situations, Martin, and that sometimes we need to leave, like it's okay if you have to leave a marriage, whether you decide that or the other person decides that, or you decide it together that it's not healthy, because Allah does not ask us to stay in a marriage hurting each other. That is not the purpose of marriage. The purpose is peace and contentment and mercy and love. When you have Allah in between you, then that love from Allah is between you and goes back and forth. It's not a place where abuse is tolerated, whether it's mental or verbal or physical or emotional or spiritual or financial, and Allah doesn't tell you to get married and stay married at all costs, if you're being abused or if you are in a situation that you're being hurt. And, what happens that we just become complacent because we're so afraid of what people are going to say, what people are going to do, how, your child is going to, what's going to happen to your child, how much hurt and pain your child is going to go through because, that you just have to tolerate this and you have to just stay there and accept it. God did not create you to put you on this earth to be in a marriage of any kind at all costs if it is hurtful to you, because Allah did not create us here to hurt us or put us in pain. Now, that doesn't just mean give up and run away. That means that, if you did everything that you could in whatever your situation is, it's okay if the marriage ends. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really true, Martin. I think it's very important for people to be a whole, healthy person and not your value and your worth and your self-esteem is not dependent on your marital status or on another person. And when you have two whole, healthy people come together that create a foundation for a family, that is the ideal situation where you can thrive. No worries, Martin. No worries. I appreciate your engagement and your contribution. And, our thoughts can lead us astray many, many, many times, where we're thinking in what ifs. We're not in the present moment. We're thinking in what ifs. If I have to leave this marriage, or I'm in a state where, I'm not married, or I'm going through a divorce, or I'm already divorced, how people treat you is not an indicator of you or your value or your worth. It's how people behave or what they think and what they say is really all about them. And your job really is to be your best self. That means, what is it that you're putting in your mind? What is it that you're putting in your heart? What is it you're feeding your mind and your heart? Are you being your best self? Meaning, are you being true to your character? Because, that saying of Michelle Obama's, when they go low, we go high. When you're constantly attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you are being your best self because you're living a life pleasing to Him, then you know what? You don't have to worry about what other people say or do. Everything just evolves in a way that the right people come into your life, the right resources come into your life. You get taken care of because you're doing the best thing that you want, that you can do. And you know what? Your best is good enough. So a lot of times we feel that there's so much. Thank you for the hearts. Hey Nilu, assalamu alaikum. Hey Ruth, assalamu alaikum. Hey Brita, thank you for joining. Good to see you. And it's normal to have fears. Assalamu alaikum, Amida. Thanks for being here. It's normal to have fears. It's normal to be afraid, but it's not truth. It's not truth because we believe that it's truth because that's what we're thinking and that's what we're feeling. Like it feels so real when we're thinking it in our mind, but it's not actual reality. It's not playing out. And And when we get lost in the what ifs, it gets very hard to get back out of that that reality that we're creating for ourselves moment by moment. And so many of the things, when we go back to what Allah is telling us in the Quran, is that when you trust and you believe in Him, He will find a way out for you, and He will take care of your needs, right? And He will provide for you, and from ways that you couldn't even imagine, right? And where do we find that? Where do we find that? I'm totally paraphrasing, right? That Allah will provide for us from ways that we can't even imagine, and to put our trust in Him, and that He has a measure for everything. It's accounted for, right? So where do we find that? We find that in the Quran, in the chapter about divorce, right? Because that's a fear. That's a fear that happens. That's normal. That comes up. Fear about your children, fear about your parents, your community, your society, your finances, your sustenance. And we don't know what the future is going to bring. We can imagine, but if we believe what Allah is telling us, and He's telling us that He will provide for you from places that you can't imagine, isn't that so comforting? Isn't that so comforting about knowing that Allah has your back? And look, you have that resources, you have that already there, and it's like Allah's there. He's not going anywhere. It's us that are moving far away. It's us that are not believing, or it's us that are not thinking that He can make that happen for us. So Safiya is saying, having fear of criticism before getting married didn't help. Now that I'm working on believing how good I am and not let judgment get to you really helped me. And just caring for validation from Allah. That's so true, right? And that really allows you to be your best self, because you're not looking for that validation outside of yourself, because the one who created you has already validated you and already honored you and already dignified you. So there's lots of fears and there's lots of pressure, and even being pressured into being married again at once, if you get divorced, being married again. There are people who have mentalities that you can't be alone, like something's wrong with you, or you can't survive. And you think about all the women in history who have raised amazing children, who have, lived great lives and contribute in their terms of their contribution to humanity. And it's not defined by your marital status, and that's what gets confused a lot in terms of what our faith teaches us and how culture plays in, because culture is not Allah's words. Culture is what is made up by people and people's beliefs, and you have to ask yourself, what is whose value, whose words, whose validation do I need? Am I looking for? And that all of this, everything that I'm talking about, not being afraid, trusting and believing, comes from your connection and relationship with your Creator, with Allah. And only there can you find peace and contentment and safety and security, because look, everybody else on the earth that you're maybe worried about, people, parents, family, society, like they're just people. They're like you and me. They're just people. They don't have any other superpowers or any, they're not superhuman. But Allah has the capability and the power that is accessible to you to take your life into whatever direction you want to go, right? If you're doing the best that you can, if you're doing something good, if you're living a life being true to yourself, pleasing Allah, living a life that is good and pure, then you have nothing to worry about, because all of that power for anything that you want to feel contentment, you want to feel peace of mind, you want to feel happiness, that is all possible for you. It totally is. And just remember that when you have a fear, two things is that's something that you're going to be tested on, because the more you fear, the more you worry about it, it becomes a test and a difficulty and a challenge for you to overcome. And you get it because you can overcome it. And it's preparing you and strengthening you for where you need to be strengthened. And it's like, there's so many passages in the Quran that Allah tells us to trust Him, and that He has our back, and that He will provide for us. And just like the way He provides for the birds, we have all these fears because, when you're around certain people, what I talked about earlier, what are you feeding your mind and your heart with, right? Where are you connecting your heart with? Are you connecting with Allah? Are you connecting with the Prophet? Are you connecting in your prayers and in dhikr to calm your heart, to alleviate your stress? There's the story of the mother of Prophet Moses, that where look at the trust and the faith that she had to have in letting her son, her baby, just go, putting him in the water, and how Allah says that He bound her heart, right? He calmed her heart, and He took care of her fears. Well, if He can do that for her, like, why can't He do that for you? So having that faith and that trust that you're not doing anything wrong. Allah didn't create you and put you here to live in a misery. If you did the best that you can to live in misery, to live in despair, to live in hopelessness, that's not what your life is about. Your life is not meant to be married at all costs. Marriage is a wonderful thing, and marriage is a place of peace and of comfort, and a place where you're not feeling alone. But you don't have to be married to not feel alone, to have peace and to comfort. It's a blessing, right? And it can also be a test in you becoming your best self. But if you're finding yourself in a situation where you are thinking that's your only way out, your only option, there's a way to gain clarity. There's a way to know whether this is the right thing for you or not. But if you're finding yourself that you're in this situation and, you are going through a separation, you're going through a divorce, don't focus on the fears that people tell you, that people are reminding you of, or the fears in your own mind of, how am I going to survive? Financially, that's a whole nother area, right? We talk about kids, talk about what are people going to think, your status in society. You talk about, how are you going to survive financially? And you getting to a place where you trust so much with blind faith that you don't know what the path is going to be. You don't know what the means is going to be, but can you believe that it'll happen for you? Meaning that you'll be taken care of. And one of my mentors, when I was going through my divorce, told me, I heard her say this, and ever since then, I've been doing the same practice, and I found that it totally changes the perspective in terms of scarcity and abundance. So I heard her say that no matter what income she gets, whatever comes in, she donates 10% of that right off the bat. And I thought, you know what, that is so true, because the more you give, the more you get, not just with your time, with your energy, with your resources, with your money too. A lot of times we feel like, I don't have enough to give. I don't have enough to give. But, that's a way of creating more abundance for us in terms of when we give something, even if we have little, like, it always comes back to us, whether it's your time, whether it's your energy, whether it's your money. And it seems like, you don't have enough to give, or if you give this much, you'll end up with this much, and you'll have this much less. Instead of thinking that when you give, if you're giving with the intention, knowing that, you're sharing your wealth, you're sharing your resources, it always comes back to you. It always comes back to you because, whatever you put out is what you get back in. And Allah tells us the more we give, the more we receive. And that is even science is proving it now, that how do you have more abundance? How do you have more happiness and contentment in your life is by gratitude, right? And we know that because Allah tells us in the Quran, the more you give, the more you get. And the more thankful you are, the more I will bless you, right? So like science is proving it now too, but we know that if we believe and we have faith and we believe what God is telling us, that is the secret. Hey, Samia. Thanks for joining, Elizabeth. Hey, Alexandra, good to see you. Yeah, and you think about it, right? When we live in fear, we live in scarcity, we live in lack, we live and focus on what we don't have, we're going to feel depressed. We're going to feel like no matter what you have, it's never enough. And it's that thinking, oh, okay, well, when I have this house, I'm going to be so happy. When I get this job, I'm going to be so happy. When my body looks like this, I'm going to be so happy, right? But the thing is, the secret is that if you're not content and happy with what it is that you have right now, it doesn't matter how much you accumulate or what you get or what changes. You can never, that happiness will never come because it comes from inside. It comes from internally, from your state of mind and heart. Assalamu alaikum, Asya, good to see you. Thank you for being here. And so it totally is possible to move forward when those fears creep in, of your, how people are going to perceive you. Just think of how much control you have over your life. When we hang on so much to wanting to control everything and steer in this way and steer in that way, when we let go and think that, okay, well, that's saying that we plan and then Allah plans for us, right? And our plan is not the plan that's going to win out. So it's being able to plan and know what it is that we want in a way that if it doesn't go the way that we wanted, that it's okay. It's still okay because the best thing is still happening to you because your creator is planning it out for you step by step. And what you're afraid of, it's like the self-fulfilled prophecy. If you focus on what you are being afraid of, then it manifests. It comes through. It comes true because that's where your mind is at, and that's how you show up with that lack, with that scarcity, or with this is going to happen. It's called self-fulfilled prophecy, and then it ends up coming true. It's really about knowing that you're always living in the feeling of your thinking. So if you're thinking it, that's how you're going to feel, and that's how you will show up. So that's why it's so important is that how are we addressing our thoughts, right? Because, we can have sad thoughts, we can have frustrated thoughts, angry thoughts, but the life that we give it and the focus and the energy that we give it is what it will create for us in terms of our creating our own reality moment by moment and our own experience moment by moment. Because, there is the reality that we have in our mind that we are creating moment by moment by our thought. And then there's actuality or actual truth that only God knows the truth, right? We're creating. That's why people have different perspectives. So what I would say in terms of fear, it's easy to say. I know it's really easy to say, especially where you're at. And everybody may be, each person may be at a different place in their experience, whether you're married or you're divorced or you're going through a divorce. You may be at a different place. Each person may be at a different place. And I know it's really easy to say because until I understood, until I had the level of connection and contentment knowing that, look, everything is in God's hands. Everything is in God's hands, and I am going to get through this. And my fears are not real. It's just, sometimes they're so subtle and they're so subconscious. It dictates the way you behave. It dictates the action that you take or that you don't take, Hey, Rabia, assalamu alaikum, good to see you. And so what I would say is that to gain clarity on what your steps are, you have to have a quiet mind. And when you have fears, your mind is not quiet. Your mind is racing with thoughts. What ifs? If this, then that. If this, how am I going to do this, right? And when you're living in that type of racing thoughts and thinking and overthinking and thinking, you've created a whole other reality for yourself in your mind. And who's in charge of what happens in the future? And just because it happened in the past, it's not an indication that it's going to happen now. And it's not an indication that that is what your future is in store, holds in store for you, right? Because you and I, we don't make the world go around. We don't make the future exist. And we don't know how much of the future we have. So the fears are where your thoughts are taking you, right? Because that will hold you back from making the right decision and gaining clarity. So when your mind is racing with thoughts, you don't have a clear head. You're not able to make the right decisions for you and how to move forward in terms of, okay, well, in terms of even deciding what do people think of me? And why is it so important of what people think of you, right? That goes back to validation. That goes back to, acceptance, which is we all want, but we already have it, is to know and believe we already have it. When we feel like we need to get it from somewhere else, from that outside source, we keep going after it. And we already have validation, acceptance, and honor and dignity that our Creator's already given us just by creating us, right? And it becomes less of a desire or a want to go get it from other people, of what do people think of me, right? Because what people think of you is their opinion, and it's none of your business. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what people think of you, because it's about them, and it's not truth. It's not truth. Hey, Afia, Assalamualaikum. Good to see you, my baby cousin. So, knowing that, look, the fears are thoughts, okay? When you have a thought in your mind, it's not, it feels real. It feels really real. It feels like it's going to happen. It feels like when you're stuck in that mode, it feels like it's going to happen. But it's not truth. It's not truth. And we get so stuck in it because we start believing it, and then we start feeling panicked, we start feeling worried, we start feeling scared, we start feeling uncertain, we start feeling unsure. And that confusion and chaos and clutter up here, it, like one of my coaches says, it muddies the water. You can't see clearly because there's so much mud that has dirtied the water, and you can't see crystal clear. So it's amazing how much our thoughts can create the fears. And you know what? So what if people say something about you? And even if they do, like, look, I remember when I was going through my divorce, I reprioritized everything, meaning that I focused on myself first, because I can't do anything about everyone else. I can't try to go and convince and make people believe that I'm this, this, and this. And, oh, you heard this is it. How many people are you going to go do that to? And you can't control what people feel, what they say. You can't control any of those things. They're totally out of your hands. So how many people are you going to go jump up and down hoops for to try to defend yourself, right? So, here's a different perspective. What ended up happening to me, what I realized is that, who do I want to defend me? Who is going to honor and validate me? And when I switched that perspective and I said, look, it's not my job. I can't even defend myself. I'm going to go to Allah and ask God for him to defend me. And I'm going to wait patiently. Sabrun Jamil, right? It's what Prophet Jacob did when his sons told him that, that their brother was dead, right? Eaten by a wolf, right? How do you go through that? How do you make sense of that? And it's also what the Prophet's wife, Aisha radiallahu anha, did when she was being accused and she was being blamed and she was being slandered. She didn't know what to do. She was so distraught. You can imagine how she must have felt. People were talking about her. People were spreading rumors about her. People were slandering her. People were disgracing her. And what did she do? She did not open her mouth. She went straight to Allah and asked Allah to handle it, Allah to take care of it. And she got revelation. You know, you and I are not going to get revelation, but I'm telling you from my own experience that you don't have to worry about clearing your name. You have to worry about taking care of yourself. You have to worry about being your best self, worry about your own character, right? Because that speaks for itself. Your what you put out, your energy, your behavior, your character speaks for itself, where you don't have to say a word. And yes, you don't know what timeline that's going to happen on. And that is the whole concept and point of beautiful patience, sabrun jamil. That doesn't mean that you sit back and you accept and take in and soak in everything that people have to say about you and believe it and own it. No, that means that you work on yourself, you continue with your spiritual and emotional and physical and mental health, and you work on yourself, you strengthen yourself in those areas to be your best self. And that speaks volumes. It speaks louder than words. Hey Zainab, Assalamu alaikum, thank you for joining, good to see you. And that's what I did, and that's what helped me, because instead of busying your mind with the fears that you have about what are people going to say, what is going to be my status in society, people are going to reject me, you can focus yourself and being busy with strengthening yourself in those areas, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, to solidify yourself as an individual. Because those things don't define you. Your marital status doesn't define you. Going through a divorce doesn't define you, right? Your character and your behavior and your intention and your effort define you. Absolutely, Safiya. That's a great, great point. What is your inner dialogue? What is your self-talk? Because that is how you're going to feel. And the extent to which you speak to yourself and you treat yourself is how other people will respond to you. If your inner dialogue is saying, you know what, I'm a failure, you know what, I suck, you know what, I'm doomed, I made so many mistakes, I'm this, I'm that, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough. If you're internally saying that, and you're not saying it out loud, it's a subconscious running in the background that maybe you're not even aware of. You'll believe that. And when you believe that, you will show up that way. And that's the energy you put out. And that's how people will respond to you. So the extent that you talk to yourself, the way you talk to yourself, is how other people are going to treat you and respond to you. Hey Sadia, Assalamu alaikum. Good to see you here. So that is very, very, very important, Constant criticism. You're absolutely right. Self-criticism. That's oppression. That is really oppression, Think about how the Prophet spoke to people. Did he criticize people left and right? And what happens when you criticize someone? Like, think about it in your own interactions. When you criticize someone, does that help them? Does that make them want to be their best self? Or does that make them defensive? And does that hurt? Is that hurtful? Because when you tell yourself, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable enough, I'm not worthy enough, and I deserve this, I deserve to suffer, I deserve whatever I get, when you talk to yourself that way, you're hurting yourself. And that's where the pain comes from. It doesn't come from what other people say. It comes from how you interpret what they say into your own self-talk. And that's what hurts. And that's where the pain comes from. That's where the misery comes from. So, you know what? There's a difference between maybe someone saying something that may cause hurt to you because maybe you're getting defensive versus, okay, they had something to say and I'm going to take it as, is this true? Is that something I need to look within? And is that something I need to work on? And you can say it from a place of compassion and to be kind with yourself, because think about how You're so kind with other people. You're so compassionate. You're so generous. You're so forgiving. But how are you treating yourself? You know, what type of value and worth do you have for yourself in how you talk to yourself? Right? Would you talk to your best friend that way? You know, would you talk to your mother that way? Would you talk to a friend who isn't hurting or going through a hard time that way? You know, the compassion and the forgiveness we give to other people is so much more greater than what we offer ourselves. And that comes from what is your value and your self-worth? You know, how do you feel about yourself? Are you taking care of yourself in terms of your self-talk, believing that you're a valuable human being, that you're a valuable asset, that you're a valuable person, that you're a valuable creation, that, you know, think about the way you take care of a fancy car, you know, an expensive car. How do you care for it? How do you nurture it? How do you protect it? And how are you protecting yourself? And protection does not mean you get hardened and you get closed off, because that's very normal to retreat back. There's a difference between retreating back and becoming bitter and becoming angry and hardened, meaning your heart's closed off. Because when you do that, you not only close off your heart for hurt and pain and rejection, you close off your heart for love and connection and intimacy and building relationships as well. So it's not about becoming hardened and closed off. You can still be soft and vulnerable and open and compassionate and still be kind and still be firm and still be and still protect yourself, right? Because if you think about it this way, if you protect yourself by being closed off, you close off all the good stuff too. But if you rely on Allah to be your protector and your provider and your maintainer and your sustainer, you don't have to worry about all that. And when your mindset shifts and your heart shifts, doors start opening up for you. The right people come into your life, the right resources come into your life, and things just change. So, you know, my message to you today is really about having hope. And a lot of times what happens is that when we feel like we're losing hope or we're getting into a place of desperation, of helplessness, of feeling defeated by the situation that we're in, it makes you want to escape. And like, where do you go? Where do you turn? And it also makes you want to, it becomes difficult to start connecting to Allah. It becomes difficult to maybe doing your obligations, our prayers or dhikr, Quran, and, doing anything that will bring us closer back to Allah. So don't feel like when you're in a state of despair, know that Allah is the only one that can change your situation, and He will. And it starts by you taking the step that you need to take without being afraid. Meaning like, okay, you're afraid. Okay, go forward anyways. Go forward anyways in whatever it is you need to do. If that means stepping up to take care of your health, that means stepping up to prioritize yourself, then that's what you have to do. You don't have to allow the fear to keep you stuck and held back. And that anything is possible. Don't feel like you have to run away. Don't feel like, go back to that source, go back to Allah, because He's always there. He's always waiting. It's just us that go back and forth and that go far away. And then we feel even more hopeless because no one can change any situation for us. It's just, I said this before, I'll say it over and over again. Your two most important relationships are with Allah, your creator, and yourself. Your self-talk and your self-identity and your view, your self-worth and your view. So those are the two most important conversations that you have to have every day, is with Allah and yourself. And that is the way forward. And there is a way forward. You're not helpless. You're not hopeless. And it's okay. Sometimes we can get clouded and lost when our thoughts start consuming us and taking over. It feels real. But it's just a reality that we're creating in our mind. It's not truth. It's not truth. And to know that when you listen to your own truth, and you're silent and you're quiet in your mind, it speaks loud and clear. And it's up to you whether you hear it and you want to hear it and you want to go with that intuition and that wisdom and that intelligence that you get when you have a quiet mind. I hope that was helpful for you guys. I hope that was beneficial in terms of not feeling helpless or hopeless and allowing fears to take over and consume your life, because your fears don't get to decide. You get to decide how you want to live your life, how you want to show up, how you don't want to show up, how you're going to move forward, right? Because you could live your whole life just stuck and frozen in fear. And I see people doing that. They're just stuck. They're not going anywhere because they're so frozen in fear. It's literally being paralyzed. And, you're not created for that. You're not created to be paralyzed in fear and not take action. Like, human beings are meant to move, right? We're not statues, we're people. Time is always going to move. Like, the world keeps going forward, and we have to be able to move forward ourselves in our growth and, in reaching our potential and fulfilling our purpose. Hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, message me, comment. Let me know what your takeaways are, or if you have any questions, post them, and, I'd love to answer them. I'd love to share more. And if this was helpful, share it with someone who you think, may benefit from this or may need this. Thank you guys for joining, and I'll talk to you soon. And Jummah Mubarak. Love you too, Rabia. Good to see you. And, don't forget, like, every moment when you connect back to Allah, He's there. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's there for you. You just have to know that and to believe that and to reach out. And He hears you. He hears anyone who calls out to Him. Anyone that He has created, any human being, any creation that calls out to Him, He's there for. So take comfort in that, and remember to always live intentionally, connect fully, and fulfill your destiny. Take care. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum.